Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. I have with me the legendary saxophonist, Doug Lawrence, with me today. Doug, thank you very much for joining me. I'm absolutely honored that you could be here today.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for
Well,
asking.
absolutely. The last time we tried to do this, we had big conflict, but this time we're actually able to make this work. So I want to thank you for joining me. Listen, I have so many questions for you. And so let's just jump right on in. So now you're from Louisiana originally, right? But you were raised here in New Mexico. How old were you when you moved to Albuquerque?
Well, when I moved to Albuquerque, I came here in fourth grade, so that would make me what, around 8 or 9 or something like that.
Yeah.
But we left Louisiana uh, when I was 6. No, yeah, when I was 7, and we made it as far as Santa Rosa, New Mexico. And
Okay.
before we ran out of money,
Oh no.
we were trying to get to Los Angeles, California. My oldest brother, Fred, was working in Los Angeles with Louis Bellson and Pro Bailey and Frank Sinatra, and he was starting to do really well out there. So my father and mother packed me and my most immediate sister, Sarah, up and tried to make it to Los Angeles, but didn't quite make it.
Didn't so ended up here.
Ended up in Santa Rosa, and then for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then we moved up here to Albuquerque over in the war zone over there.
Yeah.
Over
Well,
in
you graduated.
Rhode Island Central.
You graduated from Highland High School,
I
right?
did. I did, yeah.
So when was that? When did you graduate, if you don't mind me asking?
1974.
1974.
Yeah.
Oh, now when because when you moved out here and you got as far as Santa Rosa, you got to Albuquerque finally. When did you start playing the saxophone? When did you start playing any instruments?
Well, I was playing the bass drum in first grade. I was playing bass drum in my father's high school band in Santa Rosa. He became a band director there. And after school, I would run over and catch his concert band and play bass drum. So that was in first grade. In second grade, I think I continued doing that, but then I started messing around with the clarinet. My father started teaching me classical clarinet. So by the time I got to fourth grade back then, when you were in fourth grade, you had the chance to be in the band if you wanted. Now, by then, we were here in Albuquerque, and I started playing clarinet in the concert band when I was in fourth grade.
Nice.
So then
Well,
I didn't really play the saxophone until I was in high school.
okay. Well, no, it's interesting because you said your dad was a band director. I had no idea. So your dad taught obviously in Santa Rosa. Did he teach also here in Albuquerque?
Taught in Berlin. Taught in Berlin school system and also in Los Lunas and a couple of the Indian reservations on the way down.
Okay.
But he was a professional musician. I'm the last of 6 kids, and all of us were musicians. But he played with Jack Teagarden when we lived in Louisiana. So he was quite an accomplished musician.
Oh my goodness. I had to see, now I'm learning something. This is the best part about interviewing musicians because I get to learn so much about you guys. So now what if you started playing saxophone and started doing more when you got into the high school time, what got you interested in jazz? Was it because of the background, because of your dad and your brother and the rest of your family? Is that what really got you interested in jazz?
Yeah, there's always jazz going on around the house. My mother loved jazz. Her favorite singer was Billie Holiday, and we always had records. My oldest brother, Fred, was, like I say, working with Louis Bellson and Frank Sinatra. My other brother, Tilly, was working with different jazz bands, including rock and roll bands, Elvis Presley, Edgar Winter, White Trash, things like this. So I would see them on TV. They're quite a bit older than me. And I would see them on TV. And, I sometimes get to stay up late on the weekends and watch Johnny Carson or something, and then my brothers would be on. But there was always music, and my father was a jazz musician,
Okay.
But he didn't want me to play jazz. He didn't want me to play the saxophone. He had the saxophones underneath his bed, and I was forbidden to play them. He wanted me to be a classical clarinetist and get into one of the major symphony orchestras because you know, he knew that that was good steady pay, good pension, you know, to get into a major orchestra. So that was his plans for me. My older brothers, not so much. You know, he had kind of groomed them to work with some of the top jazz artists and stuff. But for me, it was going to be clarinet until one day I was homesick for about a week and with bronchitis, I remember. And my mother went to the grocery store. My father was down in Berlin teaching. And I put on, my dad had these records. He had John Coltrane Plays for Lovers. He had Stan Getz Live at the Royal Roost. And so I put those on and I was, you know, it was just, I couldn't believe the sound, you know, it was just really great. I'd heard my father, who really played a lot like Lester Young and Charlie Parker, but I never heard, well, the tenor sound quite like John Coltrane or Stan Getz. So I went under the bed and pulled the tenor out and started playing it. And my mom came home and she thought it was my dad. She came in the front of the house and she had kind of this sexy voice that I'd never heard before. She goes, "Oh, honey, you sound really good today." And when she walked back and saw me in the room, she jumped about 5 feet off the ground. My mom was a dancer, so she, you know, a professional dancer, so she was really limber, but she literally jumped. I never saw her jump, so she thought it was my father. So when my father did get home from work, you know, we're sitting at the dinner table, not a word, silence, just this kept glaring at me. And after dinner, he says, all right, son, let's see what you got. He brought me back and got out the tenor and I played a little bit for him. He just started shaking his head and that was it. You know, he put me on his band about 2 weeks later. He was working 3 nights a week here in Albuquerque, at the Albuquerque Country Club, the Officers Club, or the NCO Club, and a few other clubs. There was a lot of work back then. We're talking in the 60s, you know, I was about 13 or 14. And he put me on his band, and that was a great band. You know, it had Gappy Maestas, Dave Gonzalez, who had played lead trumpet with Lionel Hampton. One of you know, Lionel used to say that Dave was maybe the greatest lead trumpet player he ever had. You know, and a lot of really good players on that band back then. So I started working around town here when I was about 13, 14, making $100 a night. So I was a rich kid. I was making $200 or $300 a week by the time I was 15 or 16 years old.
Now that's interesting. I had no idea that, you know, and it's interesting how the influence, he wanted you to go one way and you were able to prove that you could go the other way. And you've done so well for yourself. I mean, you know, playing the music that you have done. I mean, you've been a freelance musician I would say all of your life, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I won a scholarship back in the old days. They used to call it NAJE. And then it went to IAJE. So they were having these festivals. They had a festival in San Antonio, and Leon Breeden was the chief judge, educator for that. He was also the head of the jazz department at North Texas State University. And then he also came to West Mesa, had a jazz festival. And I did that with the Highland High School band. Anyway, make a long story short, he gave me a scholarship to go to North Texas State. And so in 1974, I was 17. And I went to North Texas State. And that's kind of really when things started happening for me. I mean, I was working here in town a lot, but all the older guys kept saying, you got to leave town. I wasn't really sure why they were telling me to leave town. They were getting tired of me or something, you know. But there was a wonderful guitar player in town named Bob Brown. There were some other guys in town, the guys that my dad was working with, and also Arlen Asher. And everyone kept saying, you have to leave town, you know, you have to get out of here. So that was kind of my ticket. And then when I got to North Texas State, man, I'd never seen so many saxophone players in my life. You know, they had 15 big bands there. And so that's when things started to happen for me. I was the lead tenor player, and the 1 o'clock I just got off Woody Herman's band. And there was, you know, a lot of the bands, Buddy Rich's band, Woody Herman's band. These guys were all still alive, Count Basie, sometimes they would pick up guys out of North Texas State at that
Yeah.
time. But I didn't last very long. I lasted about a semester, and I got an offer for a job that paid really well, and I ended up in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Okay.
My brother was working with Elvis Presley and also at the Stardust House Band. He had been working uninterrupted for about 14 years there. And, he was introducing me to the guys around town. James Moody was over in the sax section at the Hilton. And Carl Fontana was an old friend of my family's. His father and my father used to have a band together in Louisiana. So there was a connection in Vegas also.
Goodness me. It's amazing how all these little pieces kind of got you one way or another. You start here and then you end up there, and they're telling you to get out of town, and I don't think it was because they hated you. I think is they wanted you to expand your horizons. They wanted you to see and know that because you were probably a really big fish here in Albuquerque, and you went to North Texas State. You were a little teeny minnow in a gigantic ocean.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, my eyes were wide open at North Texas State. I mean, I never heard so many great players. And one guy in particular, Charlie Young, who I'm going to see next week in Texas, just one of the most famous and greatest lead alto players ever. But the same thing happened to me in Vegas. Eddie Lockjaw Davis was living there. Vito Busto was living there. James Moody was living there. There were a lot of great players coming in and out of there. Don Menza was coming in and out of there. And so I heard a lot of great players that the level of musicianship was pretty high. So then Vegas, they had a big strike right after I got there. I had been there maybe for a year or so, and the culinary union went on strike, and so everyone else went on strike along with them and in solidarity with them. So the musicians, they lost half their work. And at that time, I remember Lockjaw Davis telling me, my father by then I was playing alto, flute, clarinet, oboe, bassoon, all the doubles, had tenor. I had everything except a bari and a bass clarinet because lead alto was the highest paying gig in Vegas if we could do all those doubles. So I had all that. And Lockjaw told me, he says, you need to go to New York. Another instance of you need to get out of town. You need to get out of here and go to New York and sell all those horns except your tenor and your flute and your clarinet. And as luck would have it, I did end up in New York, but not before I came back here and hung out a little bit. And I think I did one semester at UNM.
Okay.
UNM Jazz Band, where there was a great band director there named Fenton Katz. He had been teaching at Manzano, and he was just fantastic. And some stuff had come down, really unfair stuff had come down, and he lost his job at Manzano, and he was selling insurance, but he was also had taken over the band at UNM's jazz band. And he asked me if I would come, and I did. It was a lot of fun that one semester. Or it might have been a semester and a half, I'm not sure. But Fenton was one of those great guys. He was very close friends with Clark Terry, and so that kind of helped me along a little bit. And then my father, back then they used to advertise. I guess they still do. The International Musician. They'd advertise openings or major orchestras, also the special bands, where the special bands are in the surface services or the Airmen of Note, the Army Blues, the Navy Commodores, the West Point Jazz Knights, and you go in at an elevated rank. So they had been auditioning for tenor chair at West Point for over a year. They had auditioned over 250 people. I don't know what was going on. Anyway, he sends this cassette tape of me playing Cherokee with the Music Minus One, the old Music Minus Ones with.
Yeah, I remember the old Music Minus One series.
With Ray Brown and Monty Budwig and Shelley Mann, and I mean, just really great Music Minus Ones on the little 45s,
Right.
So he sends that to him, and they send me a plane ticket, and I go to West Point, and make a long story short, I got the gig somehow.
Well, see,
And
now that
that's
was
how
one of those questions I was going to ask you. Is because I saw on your resume that you played with the Jazz Knights at the West Point with the West
right,
Point band.
right.
So, how long were you part of that?
I was there for a total of 8 years.
Holy mackerel!
There a long time. I got married and bought a house up there. It was the kind of duty that it paid, really excellent. I think you went in as an E6, which now I think is 90 grand, plus
All
uh,
benefits.
all benefits, right?
Yeah.
And your housing allowance. And
Right.
the duty was my duty. I was the soloist, tenor soloist. So I didn't really have much else to do. So almost every night I was in New York City. It was
So, wait,
only
where were you stationed?
no, I was stationed at West Point, but you could buy a house and live off. That's permanent duty. I could have spent 20, 30 years there if I wanted. You don't move around once you make a special band. That's your.
Okay.
So it's about an hour north, West Point of New York City, right up the Palisades.
Yeah.
So it really afforded me a great opportunity to be in New York City as many nights as I could deal with. I just had to be back at rehearsal at 9 a.m., So I couldn't be late. You can't, West Point, very strict. You couldn't be late and all that. But there were good bands. I mean, a lot of great players came out of that band. Vincent Herring was in that band, and James Kamak, the bass player with Ahmad Jamal for 40 years, was there with me. James Chirillo, the great guitarist with Lincoln Center band. So there were good musicians in the band, but the music coming out, the jazz coming out of New York, we're talking about 1978 now.
Yeah.
A lot of the guys are still alive, right?
Yeah.
So you could go on a Monday night and hear Thad Jones and Lewis on Monday night, and then every night after that there was something going on. And so
Always.
I got a chance to hear a lot of the greats, and then I got to know some of them. I started sitting in. I finally got my nerve up to sit in, and one thing led to another, and I started working with different guys, Benny Goodman, Dizzy Gillespie, Buck Clayton, Grover Mitchell, Frank West, a lot of different guys started calling me Billy Eckstein. It's a pretty close clique, in New York.
But you were able to make your way in there, and you were able to play, and you've stood the test of time. You spent so let's make sure I see if I get this straight. You were in New York City performing for over 25 years, right?
Yes, definitely. Well, let's count it up. So I started, probably within 4 months of getting to West Point, I started working with this bass player named Aaron Bell, who was Duke Ellington's bass player. And Aaron he was playing piano at that time. And I started working in 78. And then I left there. Really, I gave up my apartment in 2005. So
yeah, over 25 years. So now wait. So out of 2005, you moved back to Albuquerque. Why?
Right.
I mean, not that I'm not complaining. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad you're here. It's awesome. It's the fact that you make Albuquerque your home because you grew up here. But why move back? What brought that on?
Well, I'll tell you what brought it on. I had gone to Chicago as Joe Piscopo. I don't know if you remember Joe Piscopo, the comedian on Saturday Night Live.
Yes.
So he sings, he does this Frank Sinatra thing. And because I had worked with Sinatra, I was working with him. And I was his musical director. So he got this gig in Chicago, a big time gig. And, to make a long story short, it was a disastrous gig, but I actually saved the gig, not only for Piscopo, but for the club owner, only because I needed the money so bad. Piscopo was ready to get on the jet and fly back to New York. And I was like, Joe, let me see if I can work this out, So anyway, I worked it out, and the club owner never forgot. So he offered me a gig in Chicago for an extravagant amount of money. I never thought I'd leave New York. And leading a big band in Chicago at his new place. And it was supposed to be a 6-week thing that turned into 3 years.
Wow.
About 3.5 years, and became, one of the most successful society bands and big bands in Chicago. And it afforded me the opportunity to leave New York for the first time, but also, you know, I've been touring. I left basically Albuquerque when I was 17. I would come back intermittently for vacations, and sometimes I'd stay a little longer, but not much. Once I joined, from 1978 on, I would just come back for Christmas and stuff like that. So I was always somewhere else when someone passed away. You know, I was in Spain on tour with Buck Clayton when my father died. My brother died. My oldest brother, Fred, died. I think I was in Italy on tour. My nephew, her baby died. I was gone. So I looked at my girlfriend at that time, and I said, look, you know, I want to see if I can be next to my mom. I'm going to see if I can make this work. And let's move to Albuquerque. I'm not going to tell anyone in Chicago. I'm not going to tell anyone anywhere, just very close friends. And I'll fly into Chicago every week. I would fly in on Thursday night, come back on Sunday to Albuquerque. And it worked. That's why I still have that Chicago cell phone number.
So you moved back here
to be near my mom.
Yeah, to be near your mom.
Sisters, I have two sisters who live here. Yeah.
That's awesome. See, and I think it's good for us in New Mexico and Albuquerque that you chose to make this your home. I mean, you'd been on the road, you've toured everywhere, you've done all these things, and yet you still choose to be here and make Albuquerque your home. And that says something for what I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. It's one of those things where you want to go back to where you were, and your mom was still here, your sisters are here, your family's here. So we thank you for coming back to Albuquerque, even though we know you were New York and Chicago and every place else, and you've been all over the world. So we all know that. So let's talk about some of your touring, because you're the featured tenor player, the tenor soloist, I say, in the legendary Count Basie Orchestra, and you've been touring with them for decades. I mean, almost 30 years now? So how did that come about?
Well, that came about again in New York. Grover Mitchell, who was playing lead trombone in the Count Basie Orchestra, he was the big guy that used to carry Basie. You know, at the end of Basie's life, he was on a cart. You know, one of those little things, and then Grover would pick him up and put him on the piano stool. And Grover had become somewhat of the straw boss. Eddie Lockjaw Davis had always been the straw boss and had been getting a lot of the musicians, especially the tenor players, since Eddie left. But Grover heard me, and with a little band out of Brooklyn called Swing Street, and he was subbing on that band for Matt Fenders, who went on to work at Jay Leno's band. That's another story. Anyway, he told me, he says, look, Kenny Hing is looking to get off the Basie band. He wants to try his hand in New York. And the old man's got some gigs out on Long Island. And so I did a couple of them. And then Grover comes to me and says, Chief says, you got the gig. And I had never told Grover. I was still keeping, you know, in New York, I wasn't telling people I was in the Army.
Right.
Because I was afraid they wouldn't hire me. And as long as I could work gigs in New York City or around New York City and get back to rehearsal Monday through Friday.
Right.
West Point at 9 a.m., I was cool. So I didn't tell Grover. I didn't tell a lot of people I was in the Army. And when I told him I couldn't take the gig, I was in the Army, he you know, they were just, you know, he was a little upset, but they never forgot about me. You know, and you know, when I finally did leave the Army, I started. Kenny Hing, by the way, did not work out that well. The New York thing didn't work out that well for him, so he went back on the band. So I started subbing for Kenny when I left West Point. I was living in Manhattan, and I would sub for Kenny sometimes. And then as Kenny's health, Kenny became a diabetic, and the road is tough, really tough. Mm-hmm. And so especially the Basie band, because were traveling everywhere. And so as time went on, I became more and more working more and more with the band. But that's how I got on that band. That's how anyone gets on that band.
Well, yeah, it just happened to be in the right place at the right time, which is a recurring story I have heard over and over. Being in the right place at the right time and for favors, the people that are there. And that sounds like that's what it was.
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah,
now,
my dad had told me when I was a kid, he didn't give me a lot of advice. He says, I'd gotten in some trouble or something. He says, son, you're going to have a lot of bad luck in your life. He says, but when you get a chance, when the good luck comes along, you better be ready to take advantage of it.
yeah, and that's true.
I had, so whenever I would get a call to work with someone like the Basie Band or Benny Goodman or Dizzy or something like that, I was on, I had to be on. And so that's how that works, really.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question, because it's something that I find interesting. Now, you've been touring with the Basie Band all these years, and they have a grueling schedule. I looked at that website. You are all over Europe. I mean, all over Europe this last couple of months, and you guys go everywhere and you do all these. I mean, it's grueling work. It's, pack your bags, go on tour, play. How do you keep it fresh over all these years that you've been playing with that band?
Well, that's an excellent question. When I first got on the band, well, first of all, Grover Mitchell, Billy Mitchell, Frank West, Eddie Lockdown Davis, these guys would, they would talk to me a lot. I would hardly ever talk around these guys. I would just always listen. And, it became a thing for musicians to keep it. Can you do this night after night after night after night after night after night? And some nights you just, some nights you don't really have it. Somebody else picks up the slack. But in certain chairs in that band, which is my chair, the solo tenor chair, you got to be able to do it every night. That's your job. You open the show, you close the show. You got a few things in between, and you got to get those standing ovations. You got to go into the encores. You got to do that, and it's tough. And there's always the bet on the band when a new guy does come on the band. Is how long before he gets sick? Is it 5 days? Is it 7 days? Is it 2 weeks? Usually it's within 7 to 10 days when a new guy gets on the band, and we're just kind of watching him, and boom, he's going to get sick, because this, as you say, the schedule is really grueling. I mean, the Basie Band has always been a kind of a luxurious band. We never roomed together, even back with Lester Young, they wouldn't room together. So, and they usually, I mean, we'll go from all the way to the greatest hotels in the world, 5-star hotels, to, Motel 6. Not really anymore, but sometimes you never know, right?
Right.
But usually it's very high class, but you're still getting on a plane every morning. You're taking 1 or 2 flights. So it can be grueling. And for me, now that I'm older, when I was younger, I'd go to this, we'd be in Osaka or Tokyo or wherever we'd be, London or, Rome or somewhere. We'd be looking for sessions or a place to hang out, and go to a cutting session and see if we could cut to the local players and stuff like that. Now I go to my room. I leave that up to the younger guy.
Yeah, well,
if something's really happening, someone says, Doug, you got to come out. There's a great rhythm section. Then maybe I might go out, but I always regret it the next day.
Well, yeah, you got to worry about your health, and it has nothing to do with your age. It just has to do with your stability.
Yeah. 66 now,
Yeah. Well, but even then, when you push yourself, as you said, you're going to take bets on how long before you get sick. And the more you push yourself, the worse it's going to get.
Yeah. Well, and another thing you have to remember, that chair next to me is the second alto chair. That's always been a famous chair for great players. Emmanuel Wilkins just came out of there. He's a huge star with Blue Note. Jaleel Shaw, David Glasser. There's guys that always came out. There's the past 2 alto players have all come out of that chair and gone on to get major record contracts or work with major people. So I've always got, and that's pretty much the only revolving chair in that sax section. There's no other revolving chairs. That one is a chair that's a jazz chair that has kind of always been where guys could come and then they make it big and go, especially young guys. So I've always got this some young guy sitting next to me that is on.
He's at the top of his game, so he keeps you at the top of your game, right?
Well, I'm trying. Let's put it this way. Sometimes these young whippersnappers, they depress me a little bit. They're so good, but I'm just waiting for him to get sick.
Oh, that's funny.
But mostly nowadays, these young guys nowadays, they don't party like we used to.
No, they take care of themselves. I understand that. So let's talk about you playing with someone who's younger, because I read that you have played with a lot of pop stars, and one of the players that you played with was actually Billie Eilish. Is that true?
Yeah, I think this was last summer at the Hollywood Bowl.
Right.
Yeah. The thing about the Basie band and some of the other people I work with is, first of all, every singer in the world always wants to work with a Basie band, right? There's not a singer alive that won't work with a Basie band. So if the Basie band does call, it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to work with them, whether you're a pop singer or not. I mean, it was Frank Sinatra's favorite band. He used to just want to get on the bus with us. And it's still that way. Tony Bennett, everybody, Lady Gaga, you name it.
Right.
So, Billie, I didn't even know who she was. My 16-year-old daughter told me. I couldn't pronounce her name, and my daughter says, just think of Eyelash, about Billie Eilish. I didn't know who she was. And then I would say, I don't really listen to pop music, so I didn't even pay any attention. And then when we get there, it's her and Deborah Harry was also there. And also some really great singers, Diane Reeves, Gretchen Parlato, Carmen Bradford, some really great jazz singers, and Billie and Blondie. Well, man, Billie just sang fantastic, total talent. And
nice.
her father was there. And she grew up listening to jazz and music. So a lot of these young artists can sing jazz if they want to, but why would they do it? Because they can make $1 trillion singing a pop tune. Maybe someday she might, but she can definitely do it.
Oh, nice.
She's one of them.
So now your discography is a mile long. I mean, you have recorded with so many famous musicians, and you have recorded with so many people, and you are a leader, a band leader in your own right. Is there any particular recording that sticks out in your mind that you can say, you know what, this is like one of my top 10 recording sessions? Any particular one that sticks out in your head?
Yeah, there's a couple. I mean, I do a lot of small group stuff. I was in Italy for 3 weeks before I joined Basie. I was in Italy for 3 weeks with the rhythm section out of Italy, and drummer, the great Byron Wookie Landham out of Philly. So there were, I do small group stuff. I do some leading some groups. Next week I'm leading an all-star big band in Texas. But I have to say, there's a couple. The last bass, not the one that's coming out now. There's a new Basie record coming out. It's not out yet, but the last one, Live at Birdland, which we were nominated for Grammy.
Right.
That's a pretty good record. It's I don't usually like a lot of my stuff, but that's a pretty good one. There's another one, Ray Charles, which I love. Ray, that's a fantastic CD. There's great music on there.
So you were playing in his band? You were playing with Ray Charles?
Ray Charles with the Count Basie Orchestra.
Oh, okay.
Basie Swings, it was the name of it.
Oh, I will have to actually look that one up, because you got my attention on that one.
That's a great record from beginning to end.
Okay. I will have to look that one up.
There's a great one Live at the Village Vanguard with Buck Clayton.
Okay.
That got really dear to my heart.
Any
You know,
particular ones as you as a leader?
with me as a leader, uh, yeah, there's I signed with a record label called Fable Records in New York City, which was a Warner Brothers boutique label back in the 90s. And I had a couple of hits off there. The Soul Carnival stayed in the top 3 for something like 30 weeks or something, and won a lot of awards. And Dan Morgenstern did the liner notes. There's a couple of tunes on there I like. It's called Soul Carnival. It's out of print. There's another one off from that same contract called High Heel Sneakers. But I just recorded 4 records in Italy, where Massimo Ferraro had me recording with singers, with all this stuff, and there's some good stuff there. So, for me, really, my latest stuff is my favorite stuff.
Nice. Okay.
Leader and as a player, I'm finally starting to get a little better. I'm finally kind of.
Yeah, I like the way you say that. Are you getting? No, you are. Sorry. There's no past or present. This is you are. I've listened to a fair share of your stuff, and I love the way you play. You've got that big fat tenor sound. I mean, it's just, some tenor players have a nice, I want to say, an airy sound, and some tenor players have a big fat sound. You've got that big fat tenor sound. I love listening to you play. So I have time for one more question for you, and I warned you before we started, and I tell everybody about this. So give me strangest gig, a funny story of a gig that happened to you. Give me a good anecdote. It doesn't matter who's in it or what. It's clean, dirty. It doesn't matter. But do you have a good anecdote you could share?
I mean, there's a lot of dirty ones. I don't want to go into that. There's some that would get you thrown off the internet that are pretty wild. Jazz musicians were the original rock stars. Let's put it that way. But there's some funny ones. One that comes to mind because I was talking about it recently is the Basie band. Let's put the Basie band back in there. So lots of times the Basie band will you'll be traveling, you get to the hotel, the rooms are not ready, right? Mm-hmm. Usually check-ins around 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, right? Sometimes we'll get somewhere at noon or something, and then we have a sound check at 3:30 or 4 or something. So we're trying to get in our room. So the road manager will always call ahead of time and say, hey, are the rooms ready? From once we land, and let's try to get the ball rolling. Well, so one time he calls and they said, oh yeah, the keys are ready. And we were like, oh, this is great. It's like 11 o'clock in the morning. And we had been traveling from, we had just had a 14-hour flight probably from Japan or something. And we were back in the States, and man, we were so happy. So we get there. I remember it was up in New Hampshire, and there's a lot of snow, and we finally get there, and we're going to actually have like 4 hours of sleep, man. Everyone was just, then we get there, and the front desk had all the keys ready and had them all laid out there. And so, a couple of us grabbed our keys and we went up to keys. None of the room keys aren't working. Or no, we get up there and there's people in the room. And so we come back down and asked the lady who said, look, what do you mean? The rooms are not ready. She says, oh, I didn't say anything about the rooms being ready. I said the keys were ready.
Only the keys were ready. The keys were ready for.
The keys were ready. All the keys. So that's become a joke now for the last 20 years. Are the keys ready? What about the rooms? But anyway, that's kind of a G-rated one.
Oh, that's funny. That's good. Well, we are running out of time. I want to thank Doug Lawrence for all the things you do, because I love listening to you play. Please don't stop. Don't stop doing what you're doing. Thank you for being a part of New Mexico. Thank you for all the things that you are going to be doing in the present, the past, and the future. And ladies and gentlemen, we will catch you next time.